Thank you everybody for being here this webinar where I'll be talking about the lessons learned in 2019. Now, I may have mentioned this before, but for those of you who haven't heard me say that or we haven't talked about this before, every year I make a point of sitting down at the end of the year, usually starting sort of end of November, early December, and start reflecting on the year that's just gone past. So I sit and I look through, my quarterly meeting notes. I look through my goals. I look through various metrics I've set for myself, my targets. I look through some of the notes I've taken at meetings with people, whether it's clients, investors, or other people, and really just do a deep look at how the year has gone. And some of it also involves doing tedious things like going back and looking through my diary and my calendar and seeing all of the events I've done, the talks I've given, the interviews I've given, articles I've written, etc. But basically doing a wholesale review in whatever way I possibly can, reviewing the year, because as you all know, a year is a really long time, and we often forget how much we've done and all of the things that we've done. So I take every source that I possibly can without sort of obsessing over making sure I get every single thing, and then start to review it to try to extract the lessons that I've learned from that year. And I've been doing this now for about 5 or 6 years, pretty much since the beginning of when I became my own boss and became a founder. And I find it's really, really, really helpful to crystallize what the year has taught me, and basically to use that as both a protected time to reflect on the year that's gone, and just sort of pat myself on the back for some things that have gone well, or to to revisit things that may not have gone well, but also to then use those lessons to plan the year ahead. So that way, no experience, no lesson, good or bad, or hurtful or fun, or however you want to categorize it, ever goes wasted. And I think it's just so important, because as I said, a year can go by so quickly, so much can happen, and if we don't spend a little bit of time thinking on the year, reflecting on the year, and then actually taking the time to crystallize it and write down the lessons that we've learned in that year, that time will just be not wasted, but we won't be able to get the most value from that time and that experience. So I highly encourage all of you guys to do the same. And then I take it one step further, is and I share my lessons with other people. So again, you can do the same thing, because they say oftentimes when you teach something, it helps you relearn it and solidifies your learning from it yourself. So you could just share it with if you've got a partner, or maybe some close friends, or maybe some business buddies. Anybody who you think would benefit from sharing those lessons, share them. And you'd be amazed at how many people might be able to learn from and benefit from your experiences. So that's just a very quick overview of why I do this yearly review, and a bit of encouragement to get you guys to do the same. So I've got a lot actually that I put down in my own review, but I think most of them can be summarized in about 12 lessons. So I'll get started, and I'll just go through them one by one, and I'll save time at the end for Q&A, so do feel free to ask questions. You can start putting them in the comment section, and I'll get to all of them at the end. But I do want to make sure that we try to keep to time as much as possible, because I want to be respectful of your time and my time. So for my lessons learned in 2019, one of the big ones, my first lesson, is to question what I believe, and to be willing to explore and experiment whether or not that is true. So, for example, one of the things that I firmly believed until 2019 was that social media was totally useless. It was a waste of energy, it was a waste of time, and it was completely frivolous and had zero purpose. And I genuinely did not have a social media presence until 2019. Now, I had created a Facebook account at some point last year, but never used it, never posted on it. And I just didn't see the value in doing social media at all. Some of it might be a generational thing. I mean, I am sort of in my late 30s, but I consider myself a bit of an old soul and a bit of a tech phobe. And some of it was just, I just didn't understand how it could be useful. And then what I realized is that if I wanted to share my message with as many people as possible, to try to help as many people as possible, and reach and be accessible to as many people as possible, I had to have some social presence. And so I started looking into social media, and the key for me that sort of helped me overcome whatever block I had around it was to really start figuring out how I could use social media on my own terms. Now, for me, that meant writing a lot and actually doing video. And it gets back to this idea of experimentation, being willing to explore. I didn't think that I would ever like doing videos, and I actually love it. It's sort of, it feels a bit more personal because people can see me when I'm talking, and it's, I appreciate also that video is one of the most highly consumed medium on the internet, just full stop. So it would be a great way to reach more people. And it really helped me in creating those videos, again, refine and define the message that I wanted to put out there. But it wasn't until I started experimenting with various forms of social media that I realized that not only do I actually enjoy things like video, but that I can have a lot more impact by using it. And I do enjoy it, which I think sometimes we get so stuck in our mindset about what we do like or what we don't like, what we're good at, what we're not good at. And it's not until we actually start to question those beliefs that we might uncover either a hidden talent or a hidden passion or just something new that we didn't realize we had within us, or that could help our business. So for me, that was a big lesson, was always to question what I believe and to be willing to experiment and explore and try new things. Doesn't mean you have to like them all. It doesn't mean you have to do them all forever. It just means to be open to potentially uncovering something new and useful. So that was a big one for me. Lesson 2, and this applies in all aspects of our lives, is to declutter and eliminate as much noise as possible. So by that, what I mean is we are all very busy. Some of us, in addition to starting a business, are working full-time in quote unquote day jobs. And every person I ever speak to, and just sort of human beings at large, the one thing we always feel we never have enough of is time. Now, if we are already feeling pressed for time and stressed for time, then it's up to us to take control of how we use our time and where our time is being invested, and to declutter as much as possible. I mean, decluttering things mentally. So, stop listening to news broadcasts if they infuriate you. Stop watching TV shows or listening to podcasts that you don't agree with. Sometimes it can be as simple as unsubscribing from an email that you might have signed up for a few years ago or even a few months ago, and it just comes into your inbox and you immediately delete it anyway. I know I do that. I often will sign up for something, if it's a retail business, for example, and you get a discount for being a new sign up, and then you get this bombardment of emails, and I just hate seeing the clutter in my inbox. So I have religiously and consistently this year spent time unsubscribing from email lists that I no longer need or use. And you'd be amazed at how much you can declutter your inbox when you don't have all of this garbage. And it sounds like a very simple and small thing, but I genuinely find that all of these small things start to add up and have a big impact. And just imagine if you opened your inbox and it was literally only emails that you actively could act on or do something about or were related to your business, and not a lot of other fluff or noise. So that was one thing I did to sort of declutter the noise in my life. Another thing was I left a WhatsApp group that I was a part of for a few years, and it just stopped providing value to me. It stopped providing any insights, and it just, again, was more noise, more alerts coming on my phone, more things to just have to sort of put on mute. And just, again, even if you're not paying attention to them, it does add a little element of noise into your life. And so I would highly, highly encourage you to declutter and eliminate as much as you possibly can. And sometimes this also means either with relationships or things that you do as far as going to events, as far as meetings that you attend, whatever it is, if you find it's no longer serving you, and if you find it's not providing you valuable insights or connections, or if you go somewhere and you find that the people you're meeting are draining you of energy instead of keeping you motivated and excited about what it is that you're doing in your life or your business, then stop going. Your time is so excuse me, precious. And that is the one thing we cannot manufacture more of. We cannot get back once it's gone. So again, declutter as much as you can from your life, because all of that energy, even if it's just a few seconds a day or a minute here or there, it all adds up. It all accumulates, and it all drains us in ways that we might not realize until they're no longer in our lives. And again, even small things, like I said, leaving that WhatsApp group or unsubscribing from certain emails has made a measurable difference in my energy levels. And you won't believe me until you try it. So just try it for yourself, because it is true. It's amazing how much little things can sap us of our energy. So highly, highly, highly encourage you to save your headspace, save your emotional energy, save your time for things that are really valuable and really important to you, and declutter everything else. The third lesson for me was slightly a more philosophical one. And this is sort of more about just how we choose to live our lives, and might not necessarily be applicable specifically to business or entrepreneurship, but to expand our minds just because we can. We live in a time and a place of amazing amounts of knowledge and art and culture. And we can get so stuck in our day-to-day ruts and our day-to-day push for growth and for success and achievement and hitting a financial target or getting our next big client and all of these things that are, of course, are very, very important. But in that drive and in that constant pushing and striving, we can forget that there's other stuff out there. There's, for me, I love literature. I love art. I love music. I love comedy. I love all kinds of things. And I find I don't make enough time for it. And every time I do, I am always so pleased I did. One more recent example for me from this year is I signed up to go to a lecture by an astrophysicist, because space and sort of the cosmos is something that, sort of really resonates with me. And I was umming and ahhing, oh, should I go, shouldn't I? Oh, getting into London's going to be a bit of a pain, and, I'm feeling a bit lazy and I don't really want to, and blah, blah, blah. And I went to this talk. It was by this astrophysicist called Neil deGrasse Tyson. He was talking about his most recent book called Letters from an Astrophysicist. And it was just a really lovely, insightful evening. He was talking a little bit about astrophysics and about the stars and the cosmos and the universe. But I'm a bit of a nerd, and it was nice to indulge in a bit of nerdiness and a bit of learning for learning's sake, instead of it always having to have a purpose, it always having to have an ROI, it always having to have some direct link to something I'm doing in my business. And, the thing that hit me that evening was the author was talking about how his book can't be published in certain countries because they still have a lot of censorship. And again, we forget, because we live in countries where there isn't censorship. We have free and ready access to data and information and culture and art and opera and dance and all of these other things that aren't dictated by or censored by our governments. And we forget how lucky we are to live in that kind of environment, and we sort of just take it for granted. So I would highly recommend that we, or at least for me, it meant a lot to start being more conscious of how I'm engaging in the world, not just as a business person, not just as a leader in whatever way I want to be a leader, but also as a human being who is participating in the culture in which we live. And, we can do that in many ways. Sometimes it just means, going to see a movie that you really support, or going to listen to an author talk about their book, or whatever it is for you, you get to decide. But for me, I think, life has got a lot more going for it than just our businesses. So let's make sure that we're taking advantage of all of the amazing opportunities and resources and culture around us, because I think we can forget. And, it's one of those things, you never know what you've got till it's gone. And it would be a shame if some of the things that add so much to our cultures would ever go away or would be censored. And so let's just be conscious of that. And as I said, for me personally, anytime I have done something like that, just indulging because I can and for the sake of its own sake, I've always felt hugely elevated and uplifted as a human and not just as a business person. So that was a big lesson for me this year. And I need to, and I have already started to plan it more into my diary, signing up for events, going to the theater, going to an opera, whatever it is, but starting to plan and actually put it in the diary so that it happens. So that was my third lesson from this year. Number 4, this is sort of getting back to the nuts and bolts of business, is to recognize that sometimes I am the bottleneck in the process and I need to get out of the way in order to make things happen. So for example, I've got a fantastic personal assistant and virtual assistant. My personal assistant lives in Luton. My virtual assistant is based out of the Philippines, and they are both so highly, highly capable, really wonderful, really just get stuff done. I don't need to do a lot of hand-holding or micromanaging, and they're lovely and wonderful and easy to work with and easy to delegate to. And yet, so often, I'll ask them to do something and then not actually respond to questions they've got or give them enough direction. And then I am the one keeping things from progressing and keeping things from happening as quickly as I want it to, and as quickly as I've asked them to do it. So sometimes I just need to find a way, and maybe perhaps if this resonates with you, if you're a manager or a leader in some capacity, sometimes we are the bottlenecks that are keeping our businesses from growing or from expanding, and we need to get out of the way and just make stuff happen so that the people who are there to support us are able to do their jobs most effectively. One of the things, a very practical thing that I know I am the bottleneck on, is there are so many things that I want to delegate to either my VA or my PA, but I haven't come up with the process. I haven't given them the tools or the resources or the information I need for them to then go and do it. So I have ended up doing a lot of really, really time-consuming things that I don't want to do anymore, and they are both ready and willing and very capable of doing. But because I haven't stopped and made the time to sit down and write this process document, to sit down and write down the instructions and give them the login details and give them all of the information or access to files and all of that kind of stuff, I am making it worse for everybody because they're here just sort of, knowing that this potential task is coming their way, but because I haven't set everything up yet, it's not happening. And so I'm not only the bottleneck on keeping them from being able to take over, but I'm also my own bottleneck because I don't want to do those things anymore, and yet I haven't delegated them effectively. So it's to recognize that sometimes you can be the biggest problem in your business, or a problem, maybe not the biggest problem, but you can be a problem in your business, and to make sure that if you are getting support from other people, if you have a team, if you have a co-founder, if you've got support staff or whatever it is, make sure that they are able to get information from you quickly, reliably, and that you give them everything they need. And then once you do all of that, make sure you respond if they have questions or if they want feedback or if they need some further details. Because there have been a few things, over the course of this year where, for example, I've asked my VA to do research on certain things, and he sent me this beautiful report that answers every single question I've asked him, that answers all of the nitty-gritty details. Actually, a very concrete example is I started a podcast this year, and I've never done a podcast before. I didn't know, the technicalities around it or how to get it started and loaded and all of that kind of stuff. And I'd asked my virtual assistant if he could help me by doing research, listening to podcasts by other podcasters about how to create a podcast, doing some just Googling online and learning from others who have done it, etc. And he did all of the research I asked him to. He wrote a report that gave me answers to all of the questions that I asked him. And literally that report sat in my inbox for 2 months before I did anything further with it. So again, I was the bottleneck that was keeping my podcast from being published online, and I just needed to get out of the way. So make sure that you're conscious of the times when you are the reason things aren't happening, and make sure that if you do delegate things to other people or ask for help, that you then act on that help and you don't sit on it. Because as I said, in this example of my podcast, it could have been launched 2 months sooner than it had if I had actually just finally made time to read the research that my VA had done and then take action based on it. So don't be the bottleneck. But that for me was a big sort of slap in the face aha moment from this year. Number 5 is getting back to the slightly more philosophical sort of big picture view of life. But it basically was the lesson I extracted, and the lesson I wanted to share, is that we really, really, really need to focus on the key things that are important in our lives. And for me personally, those are my health, the people I love, and the relationships that I have around me. Now, I won't go into too much detail, but basically earlier this year, there was somebody very, very dear to me, had a really, really terrifying health scare. And it was, it got to the point where I was really, having those horrible conversations in my head, and those sort of, what's the word? Those like deals that you make with the universe about, oh, please don't let this happen, and I will do this if that happens, and all of these things. And it really just distilled to me like, God, if we don't take care of our health, if we don't spend enough time protecting ourselves and having quality time with the people that we love and the relationships in our lives that matter, then what is it all for? And I think, again, in this constant cycle of pushing and striving and growing and targets and achievement and all of that kind of stuff, that's all important. Of course, it adds to our lives and it helps us, prove to ourselves that we're capable of. But sometimes we can forget about the things that are at our core, the most important parts of our lives. And like I said, for me, it's health, it's the people I love, and it's the relationships in my life. And, for you, it might be something different, but I guess the lesson really is to just focus on those things and make sure those things that are so, so important to you aren't getting left behind as you're constantly striving and growing and pushing and achieving. Because at the end of the day, the achievement would probably, I would guess, would probably feel a bit less like an achievement if we didn't have those other things in our lives that are truly important to us and matter regardless of everything else that's happening in our businesses or in our lives. So I would say guard that, keep whatever is really, really, really important to you, keep it front of mind and make sure you're always nurturing it and you're always focusing on spending at least a little bit of time on that. And like I said, for me, it's health, family, and relationships. For you, it might be something else, but whatever that thing is for you, make sure you guard it and you cherish it, because, things, you don't know what's going to happen next sometimes. And, as with a lot of things in life, we sort of can take things for granted. So that was sort of a tough lesson to learn, but I'm glad I learned it, because it really refined and refocused my attention on what is, at the end of the day, at its absolute essence, what is most important to me in my life. So going back to a bigger picture business lesson, lesson number 6 for me from this year was about working with people that you like. Now, this sounds like perhaps like something obvious, but I find that often, even when we become business owners and when we become our own boss and we're the ones making the hiring decisions, we forget that we can also be the ones to make the firing decisions. And that, whether it's your client or someone on your team, it's so, so, so important to work with people that you like, especially now that you have a choice to do so. Not everybody's got that choice. And, obviously when you're employed by someone else, you can't choose the people you work with, but it makes such a difference. And especially in your own business, it's not just about your team and who you bring on with you. Of course, they matter, and, you want to make sure you like them. It is also about your clients. And I had a really, really lovely conversation with another founder, another entrepreneur, and she was saying how one of the best things she did for her business this year was to fire 4 of her longest standing clients. And the reason she fired them was because they just, they they didn't share her values. They weren't particularly good clients. They never really appreciated the value of the work that they provided. And, for lots of big and small reasons, she didn't go into too much detail, but it wasn't a good fit. And to finally be able to let go of them, it freed up so much of the negative energy in her own business. It freed up time and resources and talent to then focus on other clients who would probably be better clients. And it just made all the difference in the world, not just for her, but it showed her team that she actually cares about them, and that the values that they have established as a business aren't just a slogan for some marketing campaign. Those are values that they live by. And so if clients no longer are in line with those values, then they will no longer be clients. And I think that was such a powerful message to send, that it's not just the people on the team who will be sort of hired and fired, it's the clients too. So make sure, now that you have the control over who you are working with, you use that control, because it makes the biggest difference in the world. And it's probably just as easy to find someone who's competent and who you like as it is to find someone who's competent and you don't like. So, if you're worried about, oh, but they do their job really well and they're really good and they're really effective and this, that, and the other thing, fair enough. But, there's probably somebody else out there who would do just as good of a job and you would enjoy working with, and they would add to the culture of your business. And it's something to keep in mind because it makes a big, big difference. I, made the mistake earlier this year of hiring someone who I didn't get on particularly well with personally, but I just thought, oh, well, she's doing something for me that I didn't know how to do. And so, I'd sort of suck it up. And then it just didn't work. The relationship it was a bit awkward, and it did not work. So big takeaway for me is to always just work with people you like. And again, that goes from the people on your team as well as the clients that you work with, because that's one of the benefits of being a boss now. And it doesn't mean you'll always get it right. And it doesn't mean that you'll always have 100%, so it won't be 100% easy, but it's something to consider and to be very thoughtful about, because it does change the energy of your business, and it potentially could change the success of your business as well. I would argue probably more so than anything else. So definitely keep in mind that, you can now start working with people you like. And it's okay. You should like working with the people you like, and it shouldn't feel, you shouldn't have to go to work sort of dreading seeing somebody or dreading a conversation in the hall or wherever it is that you work. You can work with people you like. So that was a big one for me. Lesson number 6. Number 7, in a similar vein, your business also has to work for you. So, the reason so many of us started our own business was because we wanted to buy our time back. We wanted to have more independence, autonomy, build something new, a legacy, whatever it is. But we often find ourselves falling into the same trap of what we were, quote unquote, escaping from our corporate lives, from our employed lives. And your business is your business. So it can be structured in ways that work for you. For example, I have a friend who started a tax business, and she was saying her and her 2 co-founders, when they first started off, they would have all of their Monday morning meetings at 9 a.m. And it was super stressful because the 3 of them were commuting from all over the country, sort of from the suburbs, commuting into London to their office. And it was made for really stressful mornings. Sometimes, as any of you guys know who commute or have commuted, train schedules and other things just can get really stressful. And she realized, and then one day they realized, they're like, wait, we're the bosses. We can make our meetings at 10 a.m. and it will ease the pressure. It'll mean we probably get a seat on whatever train we're taking in to come to the office. And nothing is going to happen monumentally that will change the effectiveness of that meeting from having it at 10 o'clock instead of having it at 9 o'clock. So they made their board meetings, their weekly meetings at 10 a.m. instead of 9 a.m. And it's a simple, small thing, but it's so many small things like this that we forget when we become bosses, because we just replicate what we once knew. We replicate a very rigid corporate structure with, you work 9 to 5 or 8 to 6 or whatever it is. And you forget that actually, again, you're in control, so you can sort of make the business work for you. Another personal example is, you know what? I can take a morning off if I want to. And it doesn't mean that I should be lazy or that I should sort of just, swan around like I got nothing else going on. Obviously, I've got 2 businesses that I need to run and grow and take care of. But a few weeks ago, I just took the morning off because my my daughter was unexpectedly at home. And I just thought, well, we don't get a lot of quality time together during the week because obviously I'm working, she's at nursery. And I just thought, you know what? I'm going to take the morning off. We're going to actually spend quality time together. We're going to go to the park. We're going to go for a walk. We're going to go into town. And we're just going to spend time together, the 2 of us. And it was lovely. And it was so rejuvenating for me emotionally, physically. And it was just nice to be able to finally, just have the control over my time that I always told myself that I had. And I think that's the irony, right? Like we create these businesses to be independent, to have control over our time, but then we make all of these rules for ourselves about how we can do or can't do, and what we should be doing, and when we can't take time off. I'm my own boss. Like I'm sort of the bottleneck in my own life. And so if I want to take a morning off, I should be able to take a morning off. I haven't worked this hard for 7 years to build a successful business to then feel forced to be working, as all the time. And again, it doesn't mean to say that you become lazy or that you start taking your business for granted, but every now and then just indulge in a bit of time off. I mean, that's why we did this to begin with, is to have more flexibility and more independence. So we should be able to use that flexibility and independence from time to time to just enjoy life, or to just read a book or have a boozy afternoon lunch and and not go back to the office, whatever it is for you. But let's not forget that our businesses can work for us as well, and that from time to time it's okay to just take it a little bit easy, because again, that's why we did it. Why work so hard to just continue to grind every single day? It's okay from time to time to take a bit of a break. So that was a nice one for me. Number 8 is it's an interesting one. So this one was a big one for me this year, as it was to put yourself out there and basically just ask for what it is that you want. And the asking can come in so many different forms. So for example, I have always loved to write. And as many of you know who get my newsletter, I'm pretty prolific. I love to write. I've always loved to write. And I wanted to start writing for more publications. And so I reached out to one particular publication and I just said, hey, here's a sample of some of my writing. I'd love to write a regular column for you guys, or a couple of articles around these general topics. What do you think? And they said yes. And so from next spring, I'm going to be a regular columnist in this magazine. And it came off the back of me just putting myself out there and asking. Did it mean that I was pestering them and calling them every day? No, I just made a pitch and see if they would say yes. Does this mean that every time you ask for something, the people will come back with a yes? Of course not. It just means that you ask and you ask and you ask and you ask until you get a yes. It doesn't mean you get pushy or annoying or anything like that. But we all need to be a bit more braver in asking for the things that we want. In another example, there was a service that I was paying for, and it worked out better for us from a cash flow perspective for us to pay monthly instead of for us to pay a big lump sum up front. So I called and I spoke to the director, and I renegotiated our payment terms, and I said, hey, does this work for you instead of that? And we had a conversation around it, and he said yes. Again, is this going to happen every single time? No, but I wouldn't have known unless I asked. The same thing goes for any additional support you need, whether it's from your team or from your staff or from your partner. Sometimes the biggest thing that some of us need help with is just from in our home lives. And, for me personally, again, I am very good about asking my husband if I need some additional support. So he and I have a completely equal household. He will just as often be in charge of the meals and of picking up our daughter or dropping her off as I am. And sometimes, to be honest, the scales are sort of on his side, where he's doing more of that than I am. But it's just a conversation. And again, it doesn't mean that every time you ask for help, or every time you ask for new payment terms, or every time you ask to pitch, to write an article in a magazine, you're going to come back get a yes in response. It just means that we have to ask. And I cannot tell you the number of times I've asked for things and I've just been like, okay, well, here's my little request, and then sort of cross my fingers and seeing what happens. And that's all you can do. But unless you ask, the answer is always no. So for me, the asking has become much, much more of a part of my daily life now. Anytime I hit a roadblock, anytime I get a bit frustrated, I'm like, is there somebody I can ask, or is there something I can do that will make this easier? And if so, I just ask for it. Again, it doesn't mean that I'm entitled. It doesn't mean that I expect the answer to be yes. It just means I'm giving the other person an opportunity to help. And sometimes the answer is yes. And as with most things in life, it can just be a numbers game, and you have to work through, sometimes you have to work through a lot of no's to get to a yes. Sometimes you'll get a yes on the first go. You don't know unless you ask. So ask, and ask some more was a huge lesson for me. And then we're coming up to the final two. So this next one is an interesting one, and it gets back to how we manage the people who are working in our businesses, or the relationships that we have in our businesses. So this lesson is, I sort of call it trust but verify. So when you delegate something to somebody, or when you ask someone to do something for you, or when someone is providing a service for you, implicitly trust them. Of course, that's sort of how humanity works, right? But then make sure you are verifying. So, concrete example. Earlier this year, we worked with a lighting designer who was going to design a custom-made light fixture for us for our home, for the house that we live in. And they put together this beautiful design, and because it was a custom made piece, I had just assumed that they would have done all of this checking and double checking to get the measurements right based on the details we gave them, the measurements we gave them, all of that kind of stuff. Well, we get the light fixture, and it was too big, and it wasn't even sort of moderately too big. It was like catastrophically too big, to the point where it could not be used in the space as it was designed. And I went through this whole back and forth with the manufacturer, with the company, and it just became this big source of stress and hassle. And if I had just spent 10 minutes double checking their measurements, it could have all been avoided. Now, obviously, some of the fault is on me because I should have double checked. Some of the fault, I think, is on them as well, because they were producing this, premium priced product for us. And I just assumed that as the designers, they would have factored in all of the various measurements and distances and heights and all that kind of stuff, but they didn't. And in the end, regardless of whether they're to blame or I'm to blame, whatever, the buck always stops with me, with you, with us, right? Because I should have verified that the measurements that they gave me in the final design were actually going to work in this space. In another instance, there was someone I hired earlier this year to help me with my social media, because that's something that I just don't, like I said, I sort of struggle with, and I wasn't keen on doing myself. And I trusted her because she was the expert, and because I was hiring her and I was putting myself in her hands, and blah, blah, blah. And there were so many times where I just left her to it. And then I would get a message from a friend who'd be like, hey, I just saw this on your Instagram post. It seems a little bit off brand. Or, hey, this was the image that came across on your Facebook and it seems a little bit weird. And I totally had let go of the reins and left it all to her, which I know it sounds crazy and irresponsible, but it was one of those things where I was like, oh, well, she's the expert and I don't know social media and I'll just trust her and it's fine. But I should have checked. And, it's one of those things that is the sort of one of the golden rules of management, is trust but verify. So whatever it is that you're doing, whether it's working with suppliers or working with team members or whoever it is, trust them implicitly to get the job done right, to do the work that you've asked them to do, to, to fulfill the brief, whatever it is, but make sure you always spend that extra bit of time to verify that it's being done the way you want it, how you want it, when you want it, all of that kind of stuff, because at the end of the day, it does, it impacts either you personally or your business or whatever else. And the responsibility does lie with us as sort of the owners slash bosses. So trust but verify. And then last but not least, on sort of a high, the big lesson for me this year is just sort of a lot can happen in a year. Now, I spent a bit of time, again, in reviewing my 2019, just looking at some of the things that I've done. And it's unbelievable to me. So I launched a new business. I got over 1,000 followers for my new business. I launched a YouTube channel that has over 100 subscribers. I started a podcast earlier this year. I genuinely didn't even know where you could listen to a podcast. And now I have one that is published and available online. I spoke at over a dozen events, in addition to hosting my own. I was asked to become the entrepreneur in residence at my business school, alma mater, at London Business School. I have, I've done so many things in the span of a year. I've, overcome my fears of social media. I have a very active social presence now. I'm writing articles every single week. I'm going to be a columnist in a magazine. And I'm not saying all of this to toot my own horn. I genuinely I'm stunned at how much has happened in this year. And the thing is that a lot can happen in a year, and all of us can do a lot in a year. It's not magic. It's not like I just sat there and things fell into my lap and it just sort of magically appeared. And to be honest, if I had to distill it into a few sort of takeaways as far as lessons learned from how much has happened in this year, first of all, I would say it's, write it down. So at the beginning of this year on my whiteboard, in my annual goals and sort of year ahead planning documents that I create, I wrote everything down, every target, every goal, every sort of figure that I wanted to reach, every number, everything about what I wanted to get done this year. I wrote it down. And then I had to come up with a plan. And the trouble with a plan is that when you're doing something new, you don't necessarily know what the plan should be. So in order to help me figure out what the plan should be, I talked to people. I asked lots of questions to people who had done it before, to people who, had businesses that I admired or who I know were a couple of steps ahead of me. I got help. I got mentorship. I asked lots of questions. And then it was a question of just focusing and getting stuff done, being as much as possible, being militant with my time, making sure that I was doing productive activity all the time, that I was delegating as much of the low value stuff as I possibly could, and really just focusing on the areas that were going to create and add the most value to my business. And then it was just a question of, as I said, asking for help. So when there was a blind spot, when there was something I didn't like or didn't want to do or didn't understand, asking my virtual assistant or personal assistant for help, asking my partner for help, asking a friend for help, asking, a mentor for help, whatever it is. And then executing, learning, experimenting, pivoting, executing, learning, experimenting, pivoting, and just constantly going through that cycle to see what works and to see what doesn't. And it really is genuinely amazing to me how much can happen in a year. And, I think the thing is that, now that we're coming to the close of the year, it seems like all of this has just happened. And I myself have sort of lost sight of how much time and effort and energy I have invested into everything that's happened. And I haven't hit all of my targets. There are some, I'm just looking at my whiteboard right now, and a big target that I had set myself for this year was to publish a book, and I haven't done that. And then another one was an income target that I only got halfway. So I only got 50% of a particular income target that I had set for this year. So I'm not saying that, I'm invincible and I'm amazing and I've done everything, but I've made massive progress. And the thing is that, with this year behind me, I know that next year I can do even more and even more and even more, or I can do different things and I can set new challenges. And I guess for all of you who are listening, the exact same thing is true for you. And I hate when I hear other people say that, so I can appreciate it might seem a little bit annoying to hear it coming from me as well. But it is so, so true. You just have to be willing to sit down and plan, and then, you know, ask for the help you need, and then be diligent about the execution and however it is that you do what you want to do. But everything is possible. Literally everything is possible. And I'm a firm believer in the fact that if one person can do it, any person can do it. You know, there's nothing uniquely special about me. There's nothing uniquely special about some of the other sort of, you know, big names or entrepreneurs or whoever it is that you specifically might respect or, you know, hold up as a role model. They are all just normal people. And I think it's one of those things that I've realized over time is that the difference between, you know, sort of all of the masses and the ones that we read about or hear about or talk about, it really just comes down to how they use their time. And so again, you know, whatever it means for you, whatever goals you've got for 2020, whether it's with your health, with your business, with your relationships, with your personal growth, your intellectual growth, whatever it is, I highly recommend you sit down and you plan it and you write it down. There is genuinely a certain magic in just the act of writing things down. I was never the type of person who planned my year. I was always sort of a more fly by the seat of my pants, very intuitive. Oh, things will just happen and I'll keep it in the back of my mind kind of thing. And it just doesn't work that way. And I found that I have achieved so, so much more and so much more consistently as I have started to write down my goals. So if I leave you with anything, it's with the knowledge that you can do anything it is that you want to do in 2020 and beyond. And also to encourage you to just sit down and think about what are those things that you want to do, and then how will you be able to do them. And if you don't know the how, then ask for help, ask, you know, for guidance, ask for the advice that you need. But anything genuinely is possible. So that is me. That was my 2019 and my big lessons learned. I hope that in sharing them with you, it's helped you think about things in a different way. It's provided some insights. It's provided some aha moments, or, you know, just something to think about and hopefully implement in your business and in your life for whatever comes next. So thank you guys so much for being here. I wish you a wonderful and warm and healthy close to 2019, and a fantastic beginning to 2020 and everything that comes next. And yeah, I'll look forward to talking to you all in the new year. Thank you so much and have a great day. Bye.